So in the previous video, I had raised this question: what is philosophy? And I had given some. I tried to sketch an outline of what I think philosophy is, and the types of two broad types of philosophies. And today I'm going to look at an actual example of what a philosopher might, how a philosopher might describe his or her subject. So I'm going to take Barry Stroud's definition of or description of what philosophy is. My concern, though, is not to just, with Barry Stroud. I'm just taking his description and going to relate it to what I said earlier. So I won't be too much concerned about being fair to Barry Stroud because I'm just taking his essay and going to use it to illustrate the point I made, not to describe the thought of Barry Stroud about anything. So we had divided philosophy into two types of philosophy. It's a subject, like any other subject, which deals with questions like what there is and and the origin of universe and the origin of morality, and try to answer those questions like other sciences, but at a more abstract and general level. And probably it's a bit more disinterested from the practical standpoint. Although it is a moot point, disinterestedness. And probably it's more reflective and self-reflective in answering these questions. And also, in the same vein, it's a subject which deals more specifically with the concepts and their analysis, the concepts which are actually used by other sciences, but not analyzed sufficiently. The philosophy does that. So this is one side of philosophy, and maybe we can call it positive aspect of philosophy. But then there's another and more well-known side of philosophy, which is a claim that it is a specifically critical subject. It questions everything, anything. So that's a negative aspect of philosophy, where philosophy is not concerned with any answer to any question, but it raises question. And I'll try to relate this notion of philosophy to a specific period in European history, that is the emergence of modernity. Generally, I think this negative concept of philosophy or anything specifically thrives or is more fruitful or it has more bite when you are critiquing things which are outside your belief system. So when you're developing critique of other civilization, so, or other interpretation of your own civilization, maybe. But it doesn't have the same bite when you are being self-critical. So this type of philosophy will thrive when it is criticizing other civilization, or at a specific points in history when a civilization is going through transformation and a new vision is emerging, and that is critiquing the dying civilization and heralding something new. So that's why when modernity, at the dawn of modernity, when philosophy emerged, it was very critical of previous civilization, Christian civilization or feudal civilization, and its philosophical foundations, its epistemological foundation. But once that civilization has actually defeated the Christian civilization and modernity becomes the norm, then this sort of critical attitude becomes really very minor affair, and more of a pretense rather than the actual critical attitude. And the critical venom actually shines when it is critiquing other civilizations. So within modernity, the critique of so-called anti-modern civilization, or so-called barbarism, or less advanced, more conservative civilization, or within the civilization, within the modern civilization, still, whipping the dead horse of Christianity and all that. That's that's very powerful for obvious reason, but its own critique of its own civilization is much more positive rather than negative. Okay, so this is what we did last time. So I want to have a look at Barry Stroud, because Barry Stroud actually argues for a second type of conception of philosophy. And he thinks that, the conception of philosophy as a critique or perpetual questioning is still, should be the normal way of doing philosophy. And during his description of that sort of philosophy, which is his understanding of philosophy, sort of gives us some clues about the nature of philosophy, which might be fruitful to what is fruitful to for a deeper understanding of what philosophy is. So here he says that I'm just going to pick up a few important passages. So here he says that philosophy is a reflection. It is a reflection on very general aspects of the world. Okay, and especially those aspects that involve or impinge on the lives of human beings. So that's the more positive type of philosophy, which I refer to. Human beings are those who carry out philosophical reflection, so it can be said to be a form of self-reflection. So philosophy is a form of self-reflection, not just on a particular human being who is doing philosophy, but on your worldview and your civilization and all that. But not just any thought, even any self-reflective thought about a very general aspect of the world that involve or impinge on the lives of human beings is philosophy. So philosophy is not this self-reflection, according to, not just this self-reflection. It is self-reflection in this sense, but it is a special type of self-reflection. And he's saying this type of self-reflection can be found in any society. So what is that unique type of self-reflection he is getting? The second point he makes is that the important but not always acknowledged fact is that philosophy does not necessarily exist and certainly does not thrive in every society or culture. But every society or culture surely has some idea of the way things are in general. So, general form of self-reflection he talked about previously, it can be found in many civilizations. But philosophy as he understands it, and he is going to tell us what it is not, it doesn't thrive in every society or culture. And obviously here he's sort of, there are two things which I want to say here. And what he's angling at is Western, or more accurately modern, because not all, I mean Christianity was Western too, but modern, or modernity, or modern civilization. I mean, I'm calling it civilization just for the sake of it. I don't believe it is a civilization, but that's a story for another day. So modernity or modern civilization, what he's angling at is that's where actually philosophy thrives. That special, very special type of self-reflection, a unique type of self-reflection, which is more than self-reflection in a way which is, we described before, like a perpetual critique, or, in the same in which I last time described Kant's ideas or Descartes' ideas. And when he's saying this, that philosophy is found in modern cultures only, or modern society only, or type of societies as modern society. And he will tell us more about that, but he's not merely describing it. It will become very clear. He's actually, in a sense, he is making a normative statement. And that normative statement is that modern societies, I guess modern capitalist, liberal societies, are in a sense superior than other societies, and that's why philosophy, in the unique sense in which Kant and Descartes described it, and I discussed it last time, can only thrive in these type of societies. So he's not making a descriptive statements like certain plants are found in certain part of the world and not the other. No. So that's why he's also making a normative statement, as it would be clear in a minute. it points to something important, whatever the special or unique characteristics of philosophical thinking turns out. So it's obvious that that special type of self-reflection he's going to call philosophy is something good. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And the other thing is the societies which, harbor that sort of discipline or support it are also better than others, at least in that aspect. So he's just repeating here, but not every way of coming to terms with them, even every way of thinking about them, amounts to philosophy. So not every form of self-reflection is philosophy. Then he goes on to say that this is obvious in one way simply from the fact that there are a great many societies in both the past and the present for whom there are more important things than philosophy. Concerns about the life and death of human beings, about their relations to the world and to other human beings must be attended to before the possibility or even the conception of philosophy could begin to arise. So philosophy exists or flourishes only under certain social conditions. So he's giving us now a clue about the philosophy in his sense. So certain social conditions should be met. Social conditions. What are those social conditions? We will know in a minute. But without the fulfillment of certain social conditions, philosophy in his sense doesn't emerge or doesn't thrive in a society. So self-reflection about the world and relationship with other human beings can exist in any society, because that's people can't do without it. And some sense of self-reflection can exist as well. But philosophy in the unique sense in which it is a absolute critique, perpetual questioning, flourish only in certain social conditions. And again, it's those social conditions must be good. Otherwise, so it seems to be making a normative assumption, but so he's not just describing those societies, but we'll see. But if societies in even the most desperate circumstances where there's no place for philosophy, nonetheless need certain shared understanding or ideas of themselves and their relation to the rest of the world in order to cohere and function at all, then the presence of such ideas does not necessarily amount to philosophy. So philosophy is not just knowledge, it's not just reflection. It is perpetual questioning, critique, which we described last time, and he's going to describe it a bit more. But that type of philosophy doesn't prosper in any society. It has to meet certain social conditions, and now he's going to give us some clues at least about what those social conditions are. So obviously society must be pretty advanced. That's the first one, compared to the minimum condition needed to function or even to flourish in order for the society to support or make room for philosophy needs reasonably benign social condition and a relatively high level of economic development, at least for some of the people. But that alone is no guarantee that philosophy will have an official place in the culture. Of course, philosophy can be done outside or even against an official culture. But that happens only where a tradition of previous philosophizing has not been completely extinguished. And even then it is difficult, and in the end does not lead to much in philosophical terms, except possibly keeping the tradition somehow available until some promising time. So he's describing this, but he's giving us some hints about what he thinks. Society must be pretty advanced materially, it looks like, and also benign, at least for some people. By benign, I mean so pretty advanced, like materially, I think. so they can fund these philosophers. But so they, yeah, obviously, so they don't have to worry about their living. They're living in a good conditions. Fair enough. So philosophy. So society is such a society is funding these philosophers. So probably they are not going to be very self-critical of that society which is funding them. But he adds another condition, which is they are fairly benign social conditions. So there are benign social conditions. Benign social condition. It doesn't matter how those benign social conditions, I guess, came into existence. Like, it doesn't matter, but that he is doing philosophy in America, the whole continent is basically stolen from other people, and then built on the labor of other people who are still suffering today. That doesn't matter, because at least for people like him, those conditions are benign. So that's why he's saying at least for some people. And by benign, he means that, when he's critical about his own culture, they don't put him into jail, or for example. So there's sort of freedom for people, at least people like him. That freedom might not be available. Same level of freedom might not be available for Cornel West, or even for his compatriots. You can't get into those philosophy departments, but for people like Perry and his, ilk, so that's why he's saying at least for some of the people. So it's not just that they are not repressive as such. I mean, they might be repressive for other people. So it's not that they are benign tooth court, but they are benign at least for some people, and pretty advanced for some people. So in around that society, so other people might be suffering, but they don't become philosophers, obviously. So these are people who are well supported by society, and society tolerates their strictures. So at least there should be some people who are not repressed, who are not afraid, who live in pretty good condition and benign condition. So only then philosophy can come into full force in his sense of the word. Okay. Interesting. So then he goes on to elaborate on that. So he said that the society can't be repressive. So in repressive states where people can't say what they want, he's not saying that, for example, there can be philosophy in America. Doesn't mean that in America people are not repressed, but at least those people who are doing philosophy and people like them are not repressed. So then he goes on to give an example of I don't know what he's referring to, maybe Soviet Union or whatever. But those repressive states that have attacked or tried to suppress philosophy by turning their unemployed and harassed philosophers into street sweepers or window washer don't lack a set of ideas which they expect their citizens should share to guide their lives by. The doctrines they promulgate are general ideas and principles about the end and value of human life and how best to achieve them. But they are not for that reason alone that I would regard as philosophy. So philosophy can't survive in a state which repress philosophers or at least type of philosophy he's talking about. Uh, they might even be called philosophy. Um, so in those repressive states, I guess he's talking about states like Soviet Union, or maybe he's referring to some other states who repress their philosophers and turn them into street sweepers. I mean, I know that in America, Cornel West has gone to jail several times, and also, and in McCarthy era, there was a lot of repression, but probably not of philosophers, only those who were criticizing the policy. But generally, he thinks that philosophy cannot survive in those. So those who are doing philosophy, they have to be, fairly materially well off, and society must be well off, and at least repression is not primarily directed against those people who are doing philosophy. So a society must not only be fairly advanced, like materially, but fairly comfortable, at least for those philosophers in itself, to provide an official place for the best that philosophy can have. So philosophy, I mean, that state can repress other people, that doesn't matter, within that state or outside, like in Afghanistan, for example, or in Iraq. But at home, and in home, that sort of state can be pretty repressive against certain people, like ex-African slaves, or indigenous people, or people from Latin America. But for certain class of people, it is not repressive. So those class of people can join philosophy and do the best of philosophy in Barry Stroud is understanding. But we still have to. I thought I won't have to spend that much time, but it's just became fairly detailed. So I think there's still quite a bit left in this article which I want to look at. So I'll pick it up again. So this would be the first installment, so to speak. Okay, I'll see you next time.